Good morning, Soccerex. How are we all? This morning, hopefully, we're going to demonstrate complete hydration is the difference between winning and losing. Three of us are going to be presenting this morning. The CEO of Totum Sport, Mr. John Kelleher, Head of Science, Mr. Roger Meacock, and myself, Ian Campbell. So, where does it all begin? It all began many, many years ago, last century. We are truly a marine aquarium in which some billion cells are swimming. Now, those were the words of Mr. René Quinton, who made what was called a life-saving discovery. His research was done over a century ago. His great understanding of cellular health and the discovery he made then still applies today. He identified similarities between the composition of blood plasma and oceanic water, where microscopic phytoplankton release a mixture of nutrient-rich bioactive minerals, providing the exact amount of electrolytes required to deliver optimum nutrition, hydration. 100% natural, nothing added, just as nature intended. Speaking of nature, where did it all begin? It all began with the power of plankton. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail on plankton because John is going to go into much more detail on the relationship between Totem Sport and plankton a little later in the presentation. But just to say that plankton is the most important group of organisms on Earth, the foundation of the whole food chain in the sea. I'd just like to play you a brief video that goes into a little more detail.
Within certain areas of the oceans, there are natural rich blooms of plankton. Here, the synergistic effects of the various plankton concentrates and releases a nutrient-rich mix of bioactive materials, including at least 78 minerals and trace elements in a naturally balanced bioavailable form. These are harvested and cold microfiltered to produce the only natural mineral supplement in the world to fully nourish your cells. This product, certified by Informed Sport as safe for all athletes, is Totum Sport. This natural electrolyte supplement enhances the absorption and utilization of macronutrients and vitamins from your diet, releasing energy for performance as well as materials for physical repairs. It also plays a vital role in regulating cellular hydration and energy levels.
So, where does that bring us on to? Electrolyte Independency. Complex interactions between all electrolytes required by your cells. It goes one step further. Each electrolyte relies on other electrolytes to work at an optimum level. Even toxic elements such as lead and arsenic are required in tiny amounts to make sure that it works correctly and it works at an optimum function for your body. Totem Sport contains all 78 electrolytes. Not only does it contain them, it contains them in the correct proportion to an optimum body function. Let's talk about the Wheel of Independency in a little more detail and try and explain how it actually works. So, for example, people that suffer from cramp often take magnesium. But magnesium, of course, can't work on its own. Magnesium requires many other electrolytes for it to work at an optimum level. So as we can see, it requires manganese, potassium, calcium, phosphorus, iron, and lead to work at an optimum level. And they also require the other elements too. Another example would be zinc. Zinc requires sodium, lead, phosphorus, manganese, calcium, iron, and they all again require further elements to work at an optimum level. So in fact, let's go back to magnesium. Magnesium could require up to 40 other electrolytes to work correctly. Let's have a look at Totem Sport. It contains all 78. There they all are. It's quite impressive, as I'm sure you can imagine. Let's look at other leading sports drinks. Let's go back to the example of magnesium. As I've just said, magnesium requires lead. It requires phosphorus. It requires manganese. But they're not there. So therefore, if they're not there, they can't work effectively. Let's go back and have another look. That's what you need for optimum hydration. That's what most drinks are currently offering. And that's where we differ. I'd like to talk about why informed sport is so important. Informed sport is recognized globally by sporting organizations, anti-doping organizations, and elite athletes as the provider of quality assurance. Not only is the product tested, but they do stringent audits on all of the manufacturing process to guarantee the product is safe for all the athletes to use at a global level. We only use the best product, and we get it tested by the best people to test the product. Just to give you an example of how good their testing is, informed sport tested products, the sensitivity level is likened to having a teaspoonful of a banned substance in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. That's the level that we'll get to. So, the product itself is 100% natural. It's 100% safe. You can take it with complete confidence. It's 100% pure. There's no preservatives, no sweeteners, no sugars, and no artificial flavors. No artificial colors. In fact, it's just, as we said, as nature intended. So, what is the importance of optimum hydration? If you were 1% dehydrated, your performance would be about 5% down. If you were 2% dehydrated, your performance will be up to 10% down. And it's only after that where you start feeling thirsty when you're 2% dehydrated. Now, in a global sport like soccer, where winning and losing is so important, 1% difference is huge, but 10% difference is absolutely massive. So please let me just demonstrate that it's not as simple as just drinking water for optimum hydration. If I was to try and get hydrated by just drinking water, I'd take some water. Cheers. That water goes into my body. I'm hydrated, I'm hydrated, I'm hydrated, I'm hydrated. Oh, I'm not hydrated anymore because there's nothing to hold on to the water. I need the salts, electrolytes, minerals to be able to do that. In fact, I need all 78 electrolytes to be able to hold on to that water. So, excuse me 1 second while I take a Totem Sport. Now I take water. The water is, I'm here, I've got water, I'm hydrated, 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 right to the floor. And now I'm fully hydrated. That is the difference between just water and having all 78 electrolytes in your body to make sure that you're fully hydrated. All 78 electrolytes for optimum function. This is the only supplement that contains all 78 electrolytes. Not only does it contain them, it contains them in the correct and perfect proportion to actually make sure that you will be optimum hydrated. So, complete hydration. Why Totem Sport? And why do you need to be fully hydrated? Hopefully we're going to explain that to you right now. So, if you're fully hydrated, it can eliminate cramp. It aids recovery. It increases stamina. It enhances focus. It prevents muscle injury and supports health. To go over those points in more detail and talk about optimum hydration and brain health in a more scientific way, I'd like to hand you over to our head of science, Mr. Roger Meacock.
Hi, thanks Ian, thank you. Thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm just going to go through that list in a little bit more detail. So talking about eliminating cramp. So cramp is multifactorial. There's a number of different reasons why people get cramp, athletes get cramp, footballers. So reducing blood sodium is one of them. Totem Sport's got a good level of sodium in it, so it keeps the blood sodium levels high, which is one of the factors that helps to eliminate cramp. It delays lactic acid production. When you're better hydrated, your energy metabolism is actually more efficient. So if you're not using up glucose so much, then you're not actually building up so much lactic acid. Lactic acid is a big factor in cramp as well. We're maximizing hydration in the muscles. We're not just pulling the water that we drink into the circulation. The water from the circulation is then going into the muscles, so they are functioning better. They're less likely to cramp, so it's all working together. So aiding recovery. This is the cramp issue, and the muscle performance comes into this to a certain degree as well. Because we've got less lactic acid building up, there's less recovery actually required because there's less lactic acid needs reconverting afterwards, and there's better hydration. So if you take Totum Sport as a recovery, if you take it before your glucose, your protein recovery supplements, it helps the body to absorb those. That enhances the uptake of glucose, which helps to replenish your glycogen stores. When you're switching, when you're properly hydrated and the energy metabolism is more efficient, you're delaying that switch to anaerobic metabolism, and that again reduces the risk of injuries. So we're controlling cell acidity, reducing the risk of cramp, and enhancing recovery. So it's doing all these things in one. It absorbs the absorption of amino acids in the proteins that you might get from recovery supplements. And what we get a common report back from athletes and footballers is that they get virtually their delayed onset muscle soreness, sometimes called DOMS, is eliminated or severely reduced. I mean, most people, I think, find it's eliminated. So that shows how much better the muscles are recovering and how much better they're functioning during work as well. So obviously, playing football, playing soccer isn't just about kicking a ball around. You've actually got to work out what you're doing. There's an element of cognitive function and focus required. So if the muscles aren't using up the glucose so much and the blood glucose is being maintained, that is actually the main energy source for the brain. So we're getting better cognitive function, better focus, better maintenance of decision making, and better decision making and better reflexes as well. So increasing stamina. Obviously, this is a sort of a function of everything else working efficiently. So if your muscles aren't using up glucose so much, if your brain is functioning better, then and you're able to go for longer, then that's all part of what makes your increased stamina. So again, the delay from the switch to aerobic to anaerobic metabolism is really important in helping that function to maintain. So optimizing cell metabolism at a very functional, very basic level. And this regulates blood sugar levels and again ensures that supply of glucose is available for the oxygen. So then we're getting a much more efficient burn and less lactic acid buildup. So when you've got less lactic acid in the system and you've got better oxygen energy metabolism, you're far less likely to have muscle injuries. You know, you can put in that extra sprint at the end of the game where you're really trying to make that tackle or try and go for the goal, and you put that little extra effort in, and you're going to be muscles are going to be able to respond without going into cramping and then causing muscle injuries. Obviously, if you're lucky, a muscle injury might keep you out just for the end of the game, but it might keep you out for a few weeks. Or if it's a bad, serious muscle injury, it could take you out, obviously, for the rest of the season. If that's one of your key players, that's a big factor. So we're replenishing glycogen stores, which is then making sure that the muscles are ready for your next session. You know, the definition of overtraining is actually doing your next session before you've recovered from the previous one. So the more recovered, the better your glycogen stores are there, the more you're going to be able to work in your next session and reduce injury risks. Again, we talked about delay in the increase in blood lactate, and we're actually supporting health, because when we're not just supporting the brain function, we're not just supporting the muscles, we're actually supporting the immune system. When soccer players, athletes are working hard, one of the systems that actually often suffers is the immune system. So if you can't resist infection, and then you can't fight it very well, but you're also restricted in what you're able to take because of blood doping restrictions, then actually keeping a strong immune system is really important to keeping your players on the pitch. So there we go. So you're more vulnerable to circulating infections. If you get them, you can't actually fight them very well as well. So because Totem Sport contains all the electrolytes which help to support the immune system, we're fundamentally supporting health. There's one saying which I don't agree with, which says, good performance starts where health stops, and it doesn't have to be that way. It may have been that way in the past, but actually my view is a good performance is based on a strong foundation of health, and if you haven't got a strong foundation of health, you can't go on to perform and maintain it and keep that consistency. So we're supporting the body through physical, mental and emotional stress, which, you know, in a modern game we're all faced with all those things. So we had a study done which proved the lactic acid buildup was reduced by 46%, which is massive. This was done at the published in the Biology of Sport journal, and they used 12 players. They did a crossover trial, so half of them used Totum Sport first, half of them used the placebo first, and then they swapped over, and then they took the blood results all the way through the exercise to see what happened to the blood lactate, and the result was it reduced the blood lactic build-up by 46%. So we're optimizing hydration. Here we've got a red blood cell that we can see. Obviously got a picture of a normal red blood cell on your left. And on the one down below, it looks a little bit like a pig. It's been struggling, and the water has come out of it because it's not properly hydrated. And then you've got a very well hydrated blood cell on the right hand side there as well. Because what happens is the electrolytes pull the water into the cells and help them to function better. So some of the water is moving in by osmosis. There's also some active movement of water as well. And we've actually had some studies done in Georgia Tech recently. They discovered that the hydration affects the brain shape. Obviously, brain health has become really important in soccer and football, and obviously a lot for other contact sports as well. So it's really important to get the proper brain hydration. So 80% of the water is brain itself. But we also need to maintain the cerebrospinal fluid around. And I've got a little example of that. See, this is grossly exaggerated, but if you can imagine, this water bottle is your skull. And if you haven't got very much water in your cerebrospinal fluid, if I shake it, there's quite a lot of movement of what's going on inside that skull. If we take a skull here, which has got a lot more cerebrospinal fluid in it, it's a lot more hydrated, and I shake it up, there's a lot less violence. If you imagine the brain is sitting in that fluid, it won't be knocking against the side of the skull so well. So hydration is really important, not just for the decision making, but also for brain health as well. And they discovered, obviously, in this Georgia Tech study, that dehydration makes even routine tasks more difficult. So that's why when you get towards the end of a game, that's often when players make mistakes, they can't judge a pass, they're not making their good decisions, and they're not timing tackles and things well as well. So brain health in sport, water alone doesn't properly hydrate you, exactly what Ian was saying. You know, what he was doing in the examination example of his body, the same is true just within the brain itself and within the skull. So we need Totem Sport to get that cerebrospinal fluid to as maximum as possible to reduce that chronic traumatic encephalopathy risk from the consistent low-level concussions which we see. So we talked about cerebrospinal fluid cushioning the brain. And if you've got optimal hydration, the cerebrospinal fluid will increase and it gives you more protection. So to achieve total hydration, as Ian said, we've got to increase cellular hydration. You know, the whole body, we're made up of cells. So we can't just look at it as, well, we just drink it and it's in the body, it's okay. We've actually got to get the cells and the proper water in the proper compartments of the body for that hydration to actually stay and work and do its job wherever it's needed. And we can only get that with that 78 electrolytes. You know, the few don't work together. As Ian's mineral interdependency showed, they are so reliant on each other, you can't just supplement in isolation and expect everything to work as optimally as it should do. So here I'm going to hand over to John now, as our CEO, and he's going to talk to you a little bit more about plankton.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. I want to talk about Totem Sport and why it's so different and why it works and works and works and works and works every time someone takes it. But before that, I want to talk about a doctor we work with in Baton Rouge who specializes in concussion. And he's an expert. He's dealt with 4,000 cases of sports concussion. And he uses hyperbaric as one of the therapies to bring the brain function back to where it should be after concussion. He started using Totum Sport about 3 months ago. And I spoke to him yesterday. I told him we were coming on board, and he says, John, I've got some news you can share with the people you're talking to. In the 3 months he's been using Totum Sport, he has sped up the recovery of the function of the brain by more than 50%. Where he used to have to go for 25 to 30 sessions of hyperbaric in the chamber, he now does 12 to 13. And he explained to me the reason why. It's about water. It's about the body holding on to water and using the water to actually make it healthy and to make it totally hydrated. And what he's saying is when they go into the hyperbaric chamber, the body needs to hold on to the water so it works better and it gets the whole body going again. And he's about to write a paper on that. And something else before I go back to the plankton. We were recently invited to Kiev by the WBC. Now, we all know that boxing is it's a dinosaur. They don't change, they don't want to change, they don't want to know anything about, the modern world and so on and so forth. But one thing they do know, and that is that dehydration is a serious, serious problem in boxing. And they invited us. We were the first company that they've actually invited to talk to the whole delegation at their convention in Kiev. And they just kind of said, I tell you what, come in Tuesday for half an hour and talk to the medical board. We spent 3 hours with the medical board. That's 20 doctors from all over the world who fully understood what we were talking about hydration. About hydration in sports is so vital. We all know it is, but we don't know how to achieve it because we haven't been able to achieve it, because if we had been able to achieve it, there would have been a product out there that everybody was taking that would have been magnesium or whatever the case may be. So much so with boxing that the British Board of Boxing Control have now instigated a new training formula within every coach who renews their license must go through training on hydration and dehydration, and they've asked us to deliver that. That's a big step for a company to work with an organization like the WBC. But I think what I want to get across to you this morning is why we're different, and it's so important. People will talk about nature, talk about the science, talk about natural. We are so natural, it's 100%. And these guys over here, plankton, they're the most incredible organisms on Earth. I mean, if you sit here and you breathe, as you breathe, it keeps us alive. It's oxygen. 70% of the oxygen we breathe are created by plankton. And by the way, the rainforests, they use plankton to actually create oxygen as well. So plankton is a source of life, not just in food for the fish in the sea, but also for humans who breathe everything that they've created for us. The other thing about plankton is they create something in the sea that was described by Richard Attenborough in Blue Planet as the most potent and most fantastic source of minerals found anywhere on Earth. The sea is the only place that you can find all 78 minerals and trace elements, electrolytes, in one place that you can feed your 100 trillion cells. So when your cells are muscles, you must keep them hydrated, you must put water into it, but they have to be hold on to the water. And as you heard earlier, that's from the minerals that you get from the plankton. Plankton are so important in the whole process of life. Totem Sport is a direct result of what plankton do to minerals in the sea. Because you just can't go down to the beach and get a cup and start drinking the minerals. You'll probably get sick. Because our bodies are not built to absorb minerals in their natural state. I think plants are the only things that can absorb minerals in their natural state. Our bodies can't do it. they have to be bioavailable. And one of the ways you get bioavailability is by going through a digestive system, be it animal, plant, or human. It's like when we eat food, when we take vitamins, when we take minerals, none of them are bioavailable. They must go through our digestive system, and we lose 60, 70, 80, 90% of everything we eat. It's when they get through that finally they're available to our cellular structure. Totem Sport is 100% bioavailable, and here's how it works. Phytoplankton, which is a plant, and it's on the top, that floats on the sea in specific parts of the ocean, they eat the minerals. And in turn, they're eaten by zooplankton. And zooplankton put all this through their digestive system, and they excrete bubbles of minerals. Now, 125 years ago, René Quinton had this idea in his head that they must excrete minerals, it must be good. And there's another story about that, about 11:15, another talk we're doing in the wellness area. But basically, when they excrete the minerals, what we do then is we harvest underneath the plankton blooms, and we bring it in under special conditions to a state-of-the-art laboratory in Spain, and we use a cold filtration to get rid of anything that shouldn't be there. And that's important, very important. If you use pasteurized systems or you use heat on that, you kill everything. You end up with a nothing. So that's why we're very particular about what we do. What's also important is how we deliver our product to you. Now, we've been out 125 years. That's how long this product has been in the market. And you may ask, a lot of people have asked, well, how come you're only now getting into sports? Well, the reason is because we have to deliver this in a specific way. We've got to protect everything that comes from the plankton. So our delivery system has always been in glass ampules. So when Liverpool Football Club, I think it was 2005, 2006, were in the Champions League, they were using glass ampules of Totum. Now, the reason we use glass is we have to protect everything in there. We can't have seepage. We've got to protect the actual integrity of the product. What's in there, what's in that, is exactly what was excreted by zooplankton. Nothing added, no sweetener, nothing to keep it alive longer. It's exactly what was excreted by plankton, the same organisms that keep us alive on a daily basis. Now, that's not sustainable in sport. So we couldn't enter the sports market because you can imagine a football game and you've got 22 players and they're taking this and there's glass all over, or a marathon, or boxing even. You can't do it. So it took us quite a long time to find a way of delivering to sport. And that's why it's only in the last 18 months that we've actually come to the sports market, because we now have a technology in this sachet that works like glass. So inside this sachet, you have the same protection as what you have in this glass ampule. And what's so important about this is, and I want you to really grasp this, that we go to so much trouble to protect what's in the sea. What's in there has not even touched the atmosphere. And how do we know it's bubbles? I mentioned earlier bubbles of minerals. I mean, have you ever had your kids blow bubbles and these bubbles come out? Well, again, Richard Attenborough in Blue Planet showed the zooplankton excreting the bubbles, actual bubbles of minerals. So we protect what we get in the sea and we deliver it to you. The other thing about Totem Sport is that how it works with water. Because water is the greatest substance on earth, and it's the only substance that's going to keep you fully hydrated. But water also dehydrates you. Because if you drink water and your 70 or your 100 billion cells are not able to hold onto it, it comes out and takes everything with it. When you take Totem, you're given the strength, the food, the energy to your cellular structure to hold the water to keep you hydrated. That's why Totem works every time. That's why when people talk about cramp, about all these different conditions that are in place for cramp. That's why magnesium doesn't work on cramp, because it doesn't have all the other 20 or 30 electrolytes to work with it. That's why Totum works on cramp. That's why if you get cramp and you take Totum, the cramp goes in seconds. It's not minutes, it's not 10 minutes, 15 minutes. If you got the last 10 minutes of a game and you're cramping and you haven't taken your Totum beforehand and you take it then, your cramp goes. This is why it works, because of what it does with water. A couple of more examples. We're about 18 months in the marketplace, and the first year or so we were really kind of getting people to use it and getting the reactions from people. And there was one particular footballer in England, I think you might know him, Jermaine Defoe. Now Jermaine Defoe played 2 years ago in the Premiership with Sunderland. Probably the worst team, I don't know, in the last 20 years in the Premiership. And I'm a fan, so I can say that. But it was the best season he had. Now, Jermaine Defoe has told us, first of all, he had no illnesses. He had no colds, no flus, no coughs, no sniffles. So he had the whole season illness-free. He also told us it was the best recovery he's had in his career. He also told us that with Sunderland, he could do the Christmas program in the Premiership, as you know, it's a lot of games, and the Easter program. So easy that he couldn't do it with Spurs when he was there 5 years ago and 5 years younger. And then he got recalled to the English team. And if you talk to him, he'll tell you the effect that Totem Sport had on him. So guys, Totem Sport works every time. And it's not a promise we give without having the science and having the nature to back it up. And speaking of nature and science, I was talking to Adrian this morning, a friend of mine, and he was explaining to me that usually science comes after the nature. I mean, it would make sense. Nature has its way of working, and it has its own laws. And later we find out about those laws of nature, and then it becomes science. So Totem Sport was working for 125 years, albeit in an ampule. And sometimes we couldn't explain why. We just could, and there's things happening today we can't explain why. But we didn't know back in the 60s and 70s that there was mineral interdependency. So science came afterwards and showed why Totem worked. We didn't know back in the 60s and 70s that there was 78 minerals needed in your body. Science came afterwards, but Totem Sport already have it. So we're leading the way by using nature to deliver to the bodies of sports people the ability to take water and hydrate, keep fit, keep healthy, and enhance a lot of other things they need in sports.